Welcome back to React Roundup. I'm your host for this week, Jack Harrington, and with me is my esteemed colleague, Paige Niederinghouse.
Hey, everyone.
And we have a special guest today, Chirag Dugar. Hi, Chirag. How are you?
Hey there. Hi. I'm doing good. What about you guys?
So can you tell us a little bit about what makes you famous enough to show up on React Roundup podcast?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself famous, but
No. Come on. Don't sell yourself short. Okay.
So I'm Chirag, and I'm working as a software developer in a startup called Javis, and it's based out of India. So here, I've been closely working on React for a long time now, and exploring a lot of things in that, from writing code from scratch and from optimizing them, from improving the code quality, code structure, and working a lot on that basically.
Yeah, well, I get a lot of questions about that, about how to structure your code, how to do things like CI/CD, and it would be great to kind of talk about your experiences going from coding school or college or university into the real world and what you needed to learn to do that. So, like, what do you think was one of the biggest things that you need to change when you made that transition?
Okay, so I think the first thing that you have to change is the mentality. So you shouldn't be sitting and thinking that you are still in a college, and you're working, you're not making a project now. You're actually building a product. There's a big difference in making a project and building a product. So the amount of the thought process that you put in, projects are basic. It doesn't matter as to what coding style you're following. It's just a one-time thing. But a product is something wherein you have to scale up things. You can't just make something and just leave it for the other person to come and figure out things and for him, ask him to fix them out. So the major thing was that when I was transiting from my college days to my my company, I realized that there were a lot of things that I didn't know about. In college you usually feel that whatever you know is everything. But then when I came in here and you get to know that there's so much more to explore, there's so much more you can look into and identify, and you can a lot of problems or a lot of challenges that you come across, which you'd want to cater to, definitely.
Yeah. You start to learn that you know nothing. In fact, actually, it's the entirely opposite. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's like, from knowing everything in college to coming to the industry and knowing that you know nothing. But that's exactly how it sounds like.
I always find it interesting to see the different coding styles that companies have and try and figure out, well, I think early on in your career, you're like, oh, this must be the way that it's done. And then you find out, oh, actually, no, it's done like 10 different ways. And that one's actually terrible, that kind of thing.
Definitely. Yeah. That's how all of us feel, when I'm writing the best code when I'm in college. And then when you come here, you're like, this is probably the worst code I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. That's exactly, oh my God. Yeah.
I mean, in fact, even when you're working
some of the worst.
Yeah. Even when you're working in a company and then, it's been a year, let's say. So if you look back, look a year back and you see as to who had written this piece of shit. I mean, like, you can't even digest this. You're like, was it me who wrote all that? So
it happens to
it's
us
just
all.
a phase. It's a phase.
So true.
Yeah.
So Chirag, one of the things that you mentioned was that were you actually getting to write React in college? Because that's something that I've heard from a lot of developers is that they start out writing Java or they learn C++ or something else that it may be applicable if you're doing back-end development, but a lot of people don't really seem to get a lot of experience with front end before they actually get to their first job. So was that something that you did get a chance to use?
Yeah. So, in my college, I had a lot of opportunities coming up on the way. So, there were a lot of hackathons which were being conducted in college. So hackathons are the best sources for learning any technology for that matter. Be it React, be it a front end or a back end stack. So hackathons were one of the major pushing points. And then when you start working on projects, when you start building something, sooner or later you realize that you've made something, but now you want to see as to what the industry wants. Or let's say you just start picking up small internships. It might be a basic one, to build a basic web page or to have a website with basic functionalities. But when you pick it up, it boosts your confidence and it helps you, get deeper into the technology. So that was, and once you start doing a project or an internship, there's no going back. You look up to the next one and you look for more challenging ones. So that was the major, push point that helped me learn or probably, make a lot of projects or work on, in a lot of companies as an intern.
Yeah. So you would say that, some of it was definitely learning in the classroom, but a lot of it was you going out and looking for those
Yeah,
opportunities to expand your skill set and your knowledge and your experience.
definitely. You don't learn everything in the classroom. Industry knowledge is not something that you get while sitting in the classroom. You have to go out, you have to explore, you have to talk to people. That's how you get opportunities and you get to learn new things.
And it
So what
changes
kind of,
so much. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, it does. I was going to say, so what kind of advice would you have for people who are getting into the industry who are maybe still in college or still in coding boot camp? Like, how did you find those internships or make those connections? Like, how did you get out there and actually get into those positions?
That's in fact actually pretty difficult at the start, because when you're looking for your first internship, you don't have any experience to show. When it comes to the second or the third one, you already have two internship experiences to show, and the company can trust you on that. But when it comes to your first internship, it's just your projects that stand out. The first important thing is that you need to have good projects. You need to have projects that ensure or that show your quality of knowledge in React or any tech for that matter. Once you have that, getting your first internship becomes easier. And then after that, after you get your first internship, then it's all around how you are hustling and how badly you want to how fast you're finishing up projects, how fast you're grasping things and moving to the next ones. The more you try to do, the better you become.
Totally agreed.
So
Sorry.
did you have like a portfolio website, or how did you show prospective employers that you knew React, that you were, you had the skills that they were looking for? Because that is definitely something that I've heard from a lot of people who are just getting into the
Yeah.
industry, and it is so true what you said. It is impossible to get that first job because you don't have the experience. But once you get the experience, then you can get the first job, and it's just an awful cycle until you do. So,
Yeah.
how did you do it? How did you stand out and say, I know what you need and I can do it for you?
So it was pretty difficult, so I started out by making projects, as I told. I made some projects, and then uh, opened up random portals and tried applying for internships, because I wasn't getting anyone, because of the reason I just gave. So but I kept applying, because there's no end to applying. You can always apply to n number of companies, and you might not get a response from all of them, but you can still apply and you can keep trying. So that was just what I'd done. And maybe one thing that I couldn't do then, or I didn't do then, was making a portfolio, as you mentioned. A portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
I realized after my college, was a very crucial thing, because you don't have to explain anything. The portfolio does it for you. So it was only after college
Yeah.
that I realized that I should have made a portfolio, and that would have helped me more. That would have gotten me better opportunity as well.
You've also written some articles. Or do you think those would help people who are starting to look for or looking for jobs? Get your name out there?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I wrote a couple of them. One of them was around building a CI/CD pipeline using React and AWS Cold Build, and the other one was about using the best practices, or for writing a React project. So as in when you're getting deeper into a code base, a React code base, it becomes very important for you to understand that the structure that you're writing, is that the correct one, or are you messing up somewhere? Because if the base is not set correctly, then anything after that you do is always incorrect, and people start following you. It's not that after
Mm-hmm.
a tons of code have been written, no one sits and no one wants to sit and revamp the existing code piece just so that they become better. They know that
Mm-hmm.
they can make it better, but then who puts all these efforts then? So,
Right. Right.
so this was something that I realized, that if you're getting into a new company, or if you're getting in any company for that matter, and if you're working as a React developer, then you should be looking at the structures that you're following. That's very crucial. That helps you to understand as to what you're writing, helps the other person, your fellow colleague, to understand what this code says, and makes your life simple, basically. That was what I wanted to put forward in my article, because I could see that when I was working with my peers, my colleagues, there were different practices that everyone used to follow. So, everyone has their own thinking, everyone has their own thought processes. You can't say that someone's wrong, but but you can surely devise, or you can come to a middle ground. This is probably a better approach. All of us can follow this. That was what exactly I was trying to do, to, get onto a middle ground, which probably, if everyone uses, it's going to become very simple for everyone to understand code, to make them readable, scalable. Yeah.
And I gotta say, those sound like great, huge articles, like doing CI/CD and project structure and all that. I think what people miss is sometimes like 500 words is a good article. Sometimes people just want to know, how do I get the width of a div? And that's it.
Yep.
That's it. It could be like one code fragment and the paragraph above, paragraph below, and now boom, you're published author. See, it doesn't need to be anything huge. Just get out there with like whatever you got.
Definitely, less is more. It's correctly told. Less is more.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, what are some of the best practices that you've learned about building React projects? Like, how would you, if you were going into either a new company or starting a new project, what would you recommend to have a good project that's going to scale and be around for a long time?
Okay. So I'll talk in terms of the article that I've written first, so that it becomes easier to understand. So when we are writing any React code, we all definitely at least some of the components require an API call to be done, or interaction with the backend, I have to say. So now what usually we tend to do is have everything in a single component file. We don't segregate the logical part and the UI part of it. So that clutters the code, as and when you're making them bigger, as and when you're introducing more UI components, more logics come in, and it becomes more difficult to understand what the code says, and from where, basically, what are the touch points to my backend. So what I tried to explain in my article was to ensure that you follow another format, you follow a structure wherein you decide, or you devise as to, there's only a central point from where all your API is being hit. There are no multiple points or multiple touch points in your code. There's a central source file which is responsible to trigger any backend code of yours. So that might be, you can structure that in multiple terminologies, or you can make multiple logics behind them. But the one that I followed was having using a component split logic. So let's say if I have a component A, and if that component A is responsible to fetch data from a particular backend API, so I wrote another file, or let's call it a request file, which is responsible to call that endpoint. So what I had to do in my component file was to just initiate, or call the function. That does my job. If I am interested in knowing as to which API is being hit, what body is being prepared, I can always open that function in my request file and look up to it. So that ensures that I'm not cluttering my UI components with my API parts. So it's keeping them different. And by centralizing all this, now let's say there are as the project gets bigger, there's not just one or two API calls that you're doing. There are n number of them. So searching for them throughout the code base is another pain. Mm-hmm. When you're structuring them, when you put that in a single file, which says, let's say, a url.js, which has all the backend URLs that you're supposed to hit. Obviously, you can make an object, you can define what hierarchy it has to be. But when you do that, it makes it so much cleaner and so much more readable. You're not confused now. You know, if tomorrow, if I have to add a new API, or if I have to do a new backend call, I just need to add an entry in my url.js, and then I just need to call a function or define a function that is hitting that API with whatever the method you're passing to it with the body, and then you just call that function in your UI component page. So it makes everything very structured and very simple. Yeah.
Have you done much TypeScript?
I wanted to explore a lot, but again, as you are already, so my company's code base was already, set up before. So now,
so it was
moving
already in
an existing project, no, it was not in TypeScript, but moving that to TypeScript was another challenge. As and when it got bigger, it becomes more of a problem because a lot of dependency conflicts start coming in. So I'm still, kicking. I'm fighting for it because we need TypeScript, and that's like super crucial.
Nice. Yeah. So what do you think the big wins are going to be for TypeScript? Like, what, when you say you're fighting for it, what are you telling your bosses? Like, hey, it's going to do this or whatever.
That's another thing that not everyone understands as to what impact we're going to create using TypeScript. But then it's just that the developers, it's especially the developers who know what impact it can create. We as individuals, when we are writing code, we get to know what if this code is going to break. If I'm already informed about it, then I don't have to break my head after it's gone to production. I know it then and then, and I am solving all my issues at that instant. Oh, that's something that I'd want to pull in for sure. I mean, in fact, there are a lot of things that you want to pull in, but you can't do everything at a go. You have to go step by step. You have to transform things one at a go.
Hmm. So tell us a little bit about the CI/CD pipeline that you built. I'm interested to hear how you incorporated React with this, because when I've built them, it's only been either shell scripts or GitHub Actions or some kind of combination of the two. So how is it for you? Like what were you trying to build a pipeline for? Was it for work or was it for school? Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So everything that you do, you find a pain point somewhere. A pain point is something that triggers some new learning or maybe a new development from your end. So that was exactly my pain point. When I was sitting around and when it came to deploying things on my dev environment or my dev servers for the business teams to test, I had to sit for like half an hour, wait for the system to build my React project, and then go to, and all my company's architecture is set up on AWS. So we use S3
Hmm.
for deployments. So I had to go to S3, upload that file, wait for that, validate cache, and then all that process usually used to take 30 minutes. That used to make my system unresponsive, totally unresponsive. So it's like when I'm building it, I'm only building it. I can't do any other work. So that became annoying after a point, because let's say when you had to make a small change, let's say UI fix maybe, or like a small tweak, and push it to the dev servers, that's again a pain. You've fixed it for 2 minutes, but you have to sit for 30 minutes to deploy it. So that's that was a very big pain point for me, which which led me to firstly understand. So I tried a POC initially. I hope you guys have heard of Netleafy. So I
No,
tried
Netlify, yeah.
Netlify,
yeah,
Sure.
yep.
Netlify. Yeah. So, initially I made a POC on that, and I tried doing it through that. So it worked perfectly fine, and it was perfect. But then, since we had all our architecture set up here, I obviously wouldn't want to create an overhead by having Netlify in place. So my next task was to ensure that I create a CI/CD pipeline on AWS. So when I
Hmm.
researched a bit, then I got to understand that there was AWS Code Build, there was AWS Code Pipeline, which helps trigger actions, decide a order of flow. So
Hmm.
basically, now what I had tried to set up was, you just push your code to a particular branch on GitHub, let's say a dev branch, that automatically triggers your AWS code pipeline. The code pipeline is being triggered. Code pipeline initially, pulls your changes from the dev branch. It installs all the necessary packages, because it's possible that you might have initiate or included more dependencies in your fix. So it installs the
Hmm.
dependencies, and then it attempts and it runs a build on its own system. So my system is free. I don't have to wait for anything. And then post that, I've got to invalidate the caches as well. So you write a small script for that, which helps you invalidate the caches as well. So in about 10 minutes, you're good to go, and you just have to sip a coffee, and then in 10 minutes you have the website deployed.
I was just going to say, this is defeating the point. The idea is that you have 30 minutes, you can go off, you can play a couple of greater riffs in Diablo, you can make some traction, in your game. You got time,
Or have a
man. Like,
snack.
why you want it to be faster?
Definitely.
So, okay. Have you heard about per branch deploys?
Yeah, I've heard about branch deploys, and I've used them on
They're
Netlify.
really
I've
fun.
used them
Yeah.
extensively. It's fun.
Uh, is
Very good.
Yeah. I mean, when you're thinking about like making those small changes, I mean, if you've got the thing where you're talking to your product manager and you're like, hey, maybe we can make it look like this or something like that, and then you do a per branch deploy, and they can actually see it in that branch and then go, yep, that's what we want, and go. It's so much nicer than having like one branch that everybody fights over, like the dev branch,
Definitely.
and then
That's another pain. Don't even talk about that,
yeah,
because when there are multiple people working on the same code piece, and then when all of them have to deploy together, firstly there are
right.
n number of configs that have to come. I mean, they come, and then you sit and resolve them, and then you start deployment. So
The dev
that's
branch
another
is
challenge.
mine for the next hour.
Yeah, definitely. I felt that. I've seen that throughout.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
So, how was your experience with getting AWS code pipeline going? Because I'm assuming that there's pretty good documentation for it, or good tutorials that other people have written to help you get started.
Yeah, I mean, AWS has great documentation, and I have to say that. I refer to a lot of AWS documentation, and then I refer to a lot of tutorial videos as well, because it was not, I couldn't find a one-stop place for all my requirements. Initially, I
Hmm.
firstly had to look up as to how to pull data from GitHub, and then, pull the latest changes. Then second piece was to make sure that you're creating a build environment there. And the third thing was to invalidate cache. So all of them were in three different stages. So I had to, look into three different things all together, then club them
Hmm.
together, and then put it in a single place. So that is exactly what I was thinking when I wrote the article, because it was me who had to look into multiple places to get this particular flow in ready in peace. But if I can put it down for someone else tomorrow, he's definitely going to thank me later for his making his life easier.
Absolutely. I mean, future you will probably thank you later because I
Yeah.
can't tell you. I've written so many articles that I end up referencing again.
Who wrote this article? Oh, it was me. All right. That's great.
Definitely.
Makes it easy to follow.
That's another feeling. That's a great feeling.
Yeah. Because we all have like a set kind of structure and flow in a presentation. And it's because we're really just telling ourselves, through an article. And if other people tend to like that style, and that's great too. But it's good to see something you've written. And even if you don't want to publish stuff, just having like your own markdown files or using something like
Yep.
Obsidian or Notion or something like that is
Mhm.
just a really nice way to just kind of keep everything organized.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a good
It
habit to get
helps
into.
you as well, because when you're writing an
Yeah.
article, you are basically recollecting everything that you've done, and it makes your understanding even better.
Exactly. Yes. Right.
So Chirag, tell us a little bit more about what Javis AI does, the company that you work for, because
Oh,
I'm interested to hear.
Okay,
AI.
yeah, AI is the new trend today. Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
So in Javis, it basically automates purchase orders, automates parsing, purchase order parsing. So let's say a company, or let's say a distributor who wants to place an order, he sends over a purchase order that goes to a particular company. The company parses so what initially used to happen was the company used to sit, and the employees of those companies used to feed in every single detail on their own manually. So what Jarvis enables is the automation. Basically, you just pass in or throw an email on them, throw a document on them, and they have the ability to parse that document perfectly and feed it in all your systems, do all the necessary checks, take care of your stocks, and then leave, directly just send it off for dispatching basically.
Are you
Yeah.
actually using or artificial intelligence for it or machine learning at all?
Yeah. My team uses, but like I'm not directly involved in that. But yeah, I mean, we have a huge team for NLP, AI, ML, data. I mean, big data as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, accuracy is a big one on this
Yep,
one.
definitely. And
Yeah.
you when you get that accuracy that you need, it's a great thing. You're solving, or you're making 90% or 95% of the processing perfect, which is great.
So is it just a React Web API or Web UI then, or do you have are you using React in other places? Like, where are you using React in this scenario?
Okay. Yeah. So all the clients that use Javis, they have a portal to them. They have a company-facing portal to them wherein they can update all their information. Let's say, I mean, every stock information, be it product information, all their distributor information, and etc. etc. There are a lot of things that come in. So they have a portal to them, and from there that interacts with our backend services, and that's basically a sideline thing, because when you're processing a purchase order, you need all this information to ensure that the data is being correctly processed. Or let's say, if a particular item has a stock or not, is only when you look into its database, you look into its tables, and you find out that this item has this much stock left. So that is when you put it from the front end. So that's an entire chain. That's not just one process
Oh,
that
yeah.
works completely fine. It's a chain. We have an admin console as well, which is internal to Javis, and all the Javis customer support people use that for obviously helping out or assisting with the clients with any issues they come across.
So, which portions particularly do you get to work on? Because it sounds like quite a large application overall.
So I've been working in Javis for like 2 years now, and initially when I started, so I was the first person to start writing the entire code base. So in this sense, I've been lucky enough to start off with the code base that I wanted. and so
Mm-hmm.
continuously modifying it throughout the years. So I've more or less worked on the entire product, be it the company side or the admin side. I've worked on building different parts of it. Obviously, it was not just me who was doing it. There were a couple of my colleagues as well, and they built different parts, and I built different parts. So when you combine, it becomes like a full-fledged product.
Nice. And can you tell us a little bit about the structure of it? Is it Next.js? Is it Vite? How do you build the application?
Yeah, I mean, it was pure React. There's nothing else because 2 years down the line, I was just another student graduating from a college, knowing my the information that I had, and from that, I started off with React, and then started to bring in changes, bring in things that I felt was pretty good enough, and we as colleagues also, when we discussed, we felt that these were the necessary things to bring in. That's when we
Mm-hmm.
framed it step by step, and yeah, over the 2 years, I should say that we have come a long way when it comes to improvising the structure, making things faster, making them better, making them more readable. Because readability, I feel, is the most important thing.
Oh, no kidding.
Of,
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
I mean, you can compromise slightly on your performance, but you cannot compromise on readability because
Yeah.
readability is. I mean, if no one else can read your code, there's no point in writing the code.
Yeah. It's key to
What am I going to do with
maintainability.
it? Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you can't read it, you can't maintain it. And just
Yeah,
pull
for
that
sure.
thing out of there. I don't know. I have no idea what this thing does. But I'm just gonna pull it
And,
out.
and
put it
the
in
best
some-
part is that you yourself won't have an idea as to what you'd written a year back. So
Yeah.
you yourself have to figure out. Okay.
Yeah.
That's true. So, did you add any component libraries or any particular styling, or what did you decide to do for the CSS and things like that?
Yeah. So we used and design. And I
Good one.
should say that and design is very good, and I've
Okay.
loved it.
You're happy with it. All right.
I'm very happy with that because in the past where I was not I started and design only when I came to my company, and that's when I realized the power of and design. It has so much. It
Mhm.
has so much flexibility. It has so many components. You can do literally everything that you want, especially when it's a B2B product. You don't need a lot of UI components in place. You basically need the tables, you need the drop downs, you need the form elements, and you need them to be
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
that's where and design comes in, and it helped improvise or make things so easy for us. But that was one thing that we had. I mean, the CSS. So another thing that we introduced was initially, if you see that you don't have different environments, you're just always working on a single environment. So you have a single environment file, let's say, and using that particular environment file, you're trying to
Mhm.
run a production build or or start your production server basis the endpoints that you put in. Let's say if I feed in my production,
Yeah.
let's say if I feed in my
Yeah.
production backend URLs, I'm starting my production app, and if I'm putting my dev ones, then it's a dev app. So another thing that we
Mhm.
pulled in was segregating the environment files. We
Mhm.
now have an environment file for production builds. We have an environment file for development. So now what that helps
Nice.
is I don't have to continuously sit and toggle my URLs in my environment files and look up for the correct one that I have, then sit and break my head as to okay, this is not working, and I have to change my URLs back and restart the server. So this was another pain point that we had, which helped us a lot, by fixing them.
So do you do all that by
Nice.
environment variables? Do you have this is our you're in prod, you're in dev, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So now, as of today, let's say if I want to start my dev server, I just do in my script I just have to write npm run prod : a dev. So that
Oh, right.
automatically picks up
Okay.
my dev environment files with all the variables that I've declared, and it runs my
Right. I
dev.
get it. Okay, that makes sense.
project.
All right. Very cool.
Very
Nice.
good. So, did you also add in unit testing and end-to-end testing, or any of those other automated tests to help, give you more confidence that your code was continuing to run as expected?
On the front end, no, that's not something that we have added yet. But again, as I told, we have things down the pipeline and we want to add, but we can't do everything, at a single instant. So this is something that we don't have on the front end right now because it's not a lot logic driven. It has more on visibility, on data collection. It's not heavily
Mhm.
logic driven. So by not having that in the start is not affecting us. It's not creating a lot of issues for us. So we do have it in our minds that we want to integrate or we want to implement unit testing so that things become easier and we can manage errors in a better fashion then.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So in hindsight, what structural changes would you make now if you were going to start today? Would you, it sounds like you'd use Ant Design for sure. Sounds like you'd use TypeScript. Are there any other changes you'd make?
Next.js is there. That's in my pipeline. Next.js, I have TypeScript, and then I have unit testing in place. And I want to have a proper documentation as well. Using, I was exploring Docusaurus.
Oh, Docusaurus is great. Yes.
It's a really good
That's
one.
great. That's amazing. And that's so neat. I mean, I should again say that's very, very clean. The design is very neat. So yeah, we have to get in. Front-end documentation is not treated to be super important by everyone. But, when a new developer comes in and he sees as to, what, if he's just, mind blown as to what is this code? I just want to understand this. Can you give me a documentation for that? So, that's going to help us out as well. And apart from that, we're also trying to componentize things. So, initially when we all started, we had redundancies. We had a lot of code redundancies because 4 people working on different, parts of the code base all together, putting in whatever they need at that instant.
Right.
Because no one can restrict to them. And now what we're trying to do is we're trying to centralize components. We're trying to, make reduce the redundancy by clubbing things which are similar and which I can just do by a component call. So one example is a very simple example is an Excel export that we had. So there was a code piece in our so we have tables in our code base, a lot of tables in fact. So all our tables almost require an export. Yeah. So all of them require an export, because the clients need an Excel format for it. So they require an export.
Sure.
So we had implemented Excel export there. So now what happened was initially when multiple people were working on it, everyone had their own ways of exporting that particular table set. So everyone followed their own approaches. So if I have to look into the code, 1 year down the line, there was so much redundancy because everything was just repeated. And there was no use of having all of them together, in different places when all meant the same. So what we did was we split that entire piece of code and we turned that into a component with obviously passing to it a lot of props that made it more customizable by adding colors to the headings, by customizing fonts, by customizing values inside it. We made a central component, and now what we do is tomorrow if I need to make a new Excel export, I just need to call that component with the props that it needs.
Yeah.
So, that's made thinking minimal. I don't have to think what I'm writing. I just have to call the component, pass what it needs. And, it's clean. That's most important. The code's clean.
Yeah, the trick is always finding the one components that are big enough to where people are like, oh, I don't really want to write that, to not so big that they require a million props and are crazy, difficult to use. Yeah. So it's finding that sweet spot in there that really, it's not like a button, like, just write a button. But then again, you've got Ant Design, so you already have buttons, so things like that. But
Correct.
Excel export is a fantastic example for that. Yeah.
And most importantly, you need someone to take that initiative to convert that to a component. Because, if no one takes the initiative, then it's always going to be redundant throughout.
Yeah.
So, taking the initiative and then reducing that and then making sure that the next time everyone uses your component is something that you have to look forward to.
Speaking of that, do you do code reviews?
Yeah, I've been doing code reviews for fun.
Okay, so if somebody makes their own Excel export, then you're like, hey, whoa.
I'm very clear on that. You can't make things that are already made. I mean, you don't have to make things. Why are you wasting time on that? In fact, you can improvise the existing one. I'm completely fine with that, and I love to do that. But don't rewrite things that are not needed. That's very simple.
Well, that's the trick, is to find the things that you want to reuse. That's often the problem.
Correct.
And that's where Docusaurus might come in handy.
Definitely. And as the code base becomes bigger, you don't tend to find out what you need. You just feel that, who's going to look for an entire particular piece in the code base. Let's just make it on our own.
Right.
So, that's where people get confused a bit.
And then the code base gets out of control.
Correct. Messier and messier.
And sometimes it can be just one little conversation, like, hey, as you are dealing with this bug, by the way, We already have an Excel export. Just FYI,
Yeah.
look over here.
Yeah.
You know, one little
That
conversation can keep people from a ton of work.
definitely, and that's another, a good feeling, because when you know that someone's finding a challenge and is not able to, or is looking for another approach to export, in an Excel, and when you already have that built, you just tell them
Right.
it's already done.
Yeah,
just
you
use
don't
that.
want to run into that circumstance of the guy being like, "Yeah, but my Excel export's better," and you're like,
Yeah,
"Oh
definitely.
no, oh man, no."
Not again.
Right, exactly. Hate that.
Well, I was just going to ask, you were talking about bringing in new developers to a code base. So, good documentation, good structure that is easy to follow and replicate. What other pieces of advice would you have either for people who are coming to a new company and just kind of trying to get familiar with the code base, or for people who are already working somewhere, helping people get ramped up, new people who join the team?
So I think the first and the foremost thing is to give some space and time to that person, to the new person who's coming in, because he needs to understand what you've written. He's not used to what you're writing. So he needs to understand, let him take a couple of days or 3, depending on the code base, and then let him understand how things are written, what structure the company follows. And because now he's expected to follow the same structure. He can't bring in his own structure unless and until it's better than the existing one. So that's the first and foremost thing. And yep, after that, it's all about communicating. If I'm reading something, if I don't understand who's written it, I mean, if I don't understand what's written in it, I go back to, you go back to the developer who's written it, ask him, what is this? What does this mean? Can you tell me more about this? And that's how you'll learn more about the code base, and that's how you'll be able to grasp things, faster. Because you might not know everything. Why is this code piece written is something that you don't know of. And only the person who's written it knows it. You have to go and you have to ask him as to what this means, and yep, then that'll make you understand things better.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing you can do, if you know you're going to be onboarding someone in the next couple of weeks or month or whatever, then as you're going through the bugs that you're trying to deal with, you can kind of take the ones that are pretty easy to do and kind of carve those off and be like, okay, that's for the new person. And then that gives them a way to kind of get into that, that code base a lot easier. It's like, all I need to do is change this piece of text. Okay, I got to go and figure out where is that piece of text, and if you got localization, then they start learning about localization. Oh, I see. It's not hard coded it's actually over this file, blah, 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 and all that. Yeah.
Save some.
You have to go to start it simple. You can't run into complex things, and by starting simple, the person is going to be super comfortable and he's going to have a confidence booster in him. But if you just drop on the most difficultest of tasks on him, he's like, I am done with this. I can't be here anymore.
Right? Exactly.
Right.
You don't want that.
I had to Excel export. I don't know anything about Excel export. You're like, that's actually really easy. We got this component over here. You're gonna love it. It's gonna make you feel like a superhero. All right, Chirag, are there any questions that I should have asked or we should have asked along the line here?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it all. Everything, more than what I had written in my article is something that I've put
that's our thing. We kind of get in there and take a look around.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, it sounds like it's time for picks then. So, Paige, why don't you start us out with your pick for this week?
Sure. So my pick is going to be a VS Code extension that I was just made aware of this week, and it has no purpose except that it is adorable, and it's called VS Code Pets.
Oh,
it's so cute. So it's just these little 16-bit animals that you can download, and they'll hang out in the bottom of your VS Code editor, just in one little corner, and you can. I mean, people have contributed cats and dogs, and there's a crab that somebody made, and a parrot, and all kinds of just random little animated characters, and they just hang out. They run around at the bottom of the screen. The cats climb up the side. You can play fetch with them. It's really cute. So I just installed it. I love it because I've just got a couple little cats running around back and forth. Yeah, and then you can always close the window too if they're being too distracting for you. So
yes, exactly.
It's fun to look at them when you're writing code, and that's the mind.
Okay, so VS Code Pets. All right. Sounds
Mm-hmm.
good. We'll put a link in the description. And for me, I found a thing called Raycast. It's if you're on OS 10 or Apple, basically. It is essentially, I would say, like a replacement for Spotlight. So if you use Command Space a lot, to bring up
Mm-hmm.
an application or whatever, this is a much better replacement for it. It is much faster, and it's got a whole store of extensions that you can bring in, and some of them are very valuable, like AI extensions, and others are not so valuable, like a meme generator that generates memes on the fly for you, which actually I found really good because I use memes a lot. And yeah, it's just really great. And actually, you can extend Raycast, and the way that you extend it is React. So it's good for us React devs because it works like we do. So there you go.
Nice.
Chirag,
full
what do you?
circle.
Right, there you go. Chirag, what's your pick for the week?
Okay, so there was another package called Commit Lint. Commit Lint or Commit Lint, I'm not sure the name, but that was
Mm-hmm.
super good because commit messages are another pain. Everyone writes their own format. They just write, they fixed, bug fixed, issue solved. There's no sense to it. But just by introducing that, you are ensuring a structure that's being followed when it comes to writing a commit message. So that definitely helps
Nice.
in a lot of readability, and yep, I think that was a good pick for me for the week.
Okay, yeah,
Good
absolutely.
suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. A really good commit message can be fantastic, and it really is hard to come up with them, especially when you're doing your CI/CD debugging. It's always yet another try at blah 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 blah. Yet another try to get the environment variable set properly. Yet another this. Yet another that. And you have 20 different pushes. Yeah,
that's
right. Craziness. All right, Chirag, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show. Paige, good to see you again, and we'll see you all next week.